Hi, everybody. Bryan Norcross here, and good afternoon, Thursday afternoon. It's October 9th, and we've got crazy stuff going on. We do have a tropical storm, of course, Jerry, which good news is it's not going to affect the islands in any kind of significant way, and it's going to miss Bermuda, another storm moving to the north. And then we have this coastal storm, which is a big open question exactly how bad it's going to be, but it could be quite bad, actually, for a good part of the East Coast, from the Carolinas all the way to New England. And we have with us today special guest, famous storm tracker and storm specialist Mike Seidel. Hey, Mike, good to see you.
Hey, good afternoon from the Maryland coast, where everybody is wondering what's going to happen this weekend. We know it's not going to be a good beach weekend, but we're not sure how bad it's going to be at this point because the track is not etched in stone, but definitely it will be at least some wind, rain, beach erosion, and high surf. That's at minimum. And hopefully this thing behaves and doesn't stall out and we don't lose too much beach here on the Delaware, Maryland coast. Now, last year they refurbished the beaches, Rehoboth, Bethany, Dewey, summer before last, I should say, summer of 2024.
Mhm.
So they're a little bit wider. The Ocean City beaches are very, very wide. So to get the water up to the boardwalk is pretty tough, but you still get the erosion at the surf line.
Is this the talk of the town, this potential storm at
It
this
is
point?
for a lot of people wondering what's going to happen. You know, we are post Labor Day. The past 2 weekends, big concerts occurred in Ocean City. We had the Country Calling last weekend. We had, oh gosh, Luke Bryan and all kind of not Kelly Clarkson, but Carrie Underwood. Week before, we had another concert from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and there was 170,000 in each weekend. So I'm sure the folks in Ocean City and around the area were very happy to see that they didn't have to cancel. A few years ago, they had to cancel one of the weekends because of, think, I think it was Ian. It was an ice storm because they put up
Or
a
Ida, maybe?
yeah, well, no, this is just a few years ago. They
Okay.
put up a big stage. I mean, it takes 10 days to put this all together before they can
Mhm.
even have the concert. In fact, I haven't been out there to the inlet parking lot to see if they've gotten most of it taken care of ahead of the storm. They still have a couple more days. We don't expect any rain here until a late Saturday night and early Sunday morning.
Yeah, that far north, it's a Sunday to Monday
Right.
event, I guess, that far north. So, Mike, do you keep track of your trips or do you just keep track of your storms that you've covered over the years? Where do you stand on ranking these things? I know you're a big counter. Uh-oh. Looks like we lost Mike. Mike's
Yeah, I think we
connection.
lost him
Jordan.
there. We'll go ahead and maybe get
So
into the
Jordan
graphics.
Overton is in New
Yeah.
York, and tell you what, Jordan, let me take a look. Let me show everybody what's going on, and we'll get Mike back, and then we'll get on with things. All right. So out in the Atlantic, we have Tropical Storm Jerry, as we talked about there, and the Hurricane Center has 65-mile-an-hour winds on it. You look at it and you go, "Wow, that's not a very healthy-looking tropical storm." But the hurricane hunters are finding relatively strong winds and 1,000 millibars. But when you look at this picture, now this picture, remember, is what's called an infrared picture. So it's like looking at the temperature of the clouds. So those white clouds are super tall thunderstorms, and they can have some pretty gusty winds in them. But you see how close they are to the islands here. Boy, they are just offshore. But when we look at it close up with the visible satellite, so this is like a photograph from space. And here you see it's going to take a minute to crank up here. So here's the circulation. In fact, let me draw it better. I think it's right in here is the circulation. So it's just offshore. And the news is that the strongest winds are over here. And the hurricane hunters are finding almost no wind, certainly not tropical storm force winds on the left side. So as this system goes on to the north like this, it looks like the islands are going to get brushed. And it may be actually the tail of the system that has the most effect on the islands. You can see how the tail kind of curves like this. So when the center goes up this way, and then that tail down here is going to come over these islands, and 2 to 4 inches of rain, 6 inches in some spots, especially on the islands that have mountains, this could be an issue. So it's going to be after the storm is gone. So not related to the center, but the tail could affect even the Virgin Islands here as this thing goes to the north. So there's where the tropical storm force winds are according to the calculations of the Hurricane Center. And you can see it's all on the right side here of the circulation. These are the hurricane force gusts right in here. Tropical storm force winds 40 miles per hour or higher extending out there. And notice just offshore of Guadeloupe there and maybe just brush Barbuda and Antigua as it moves on to the north. All right, so there's the cone from the Hurricane Center. You notice Barbuda is in there, but remembering that all the bad weather, the strongest winds are on the other side. So anyway, it's going to be close, but it doesn't look like it's going to be bad no matter what. The thinking is maybe a hurricane on Saturday morning, but making a hard right turn before it gets to Bermuda this time. And it's making the hard right turn because of this potential big coastal storm. That's a big area of low pressure associated with that, and that's going to push everything well away from the U.S. and in this case, Bermuda. And we do have one other thing to talk about. This up here is a very healthy non-tropical storm, really spinning. Question is whether it develops any kind of thunderstorm activity near the center. They only give it a 10% chance, but just in case, they put it on there. The next name is Karen, and I don't think I know what the L name is. Look up the L name, Mike, so that when we come back, you can tell me. Okay, so here's the story with the coastal storm. Let's look at this. So what we have going right now is here's the front. This is the front that is pretty much blasted cold air into the northeast. Makes a real fall day. And matter of fact, freeze warnings up for parts of the northeast up there. And I want you to look at these clouds moving. See the clouds here moving this way, pushing the front south, but look at them in here. In here, they're coming in from the northeast. So we're getting northeast winds already behind the front, unrelated to any storm, but that's what's making elevated tides in the Carolinas and Charleston, for example, on the Outer Banks. The tides are already elevated there right behind the front because the winds there are pretty strong, but that front is moving south, and it's even going to move all the way through South Florida. That's the forecast because this storm is going to kick it down. All right, so let's jump ahead to Saturday morning now. So there's the storm as it is forecast to develop right there. There's the front end of the cool air pushing down from the north. There you see the north winds there. And then here's the tropical air coming up. So you have this big contrast of the cool air and the tropical air. That's what's making it go. It's not the warmth of the ocean water. So that's why it's not a tropical system, because it's where the energy is coming from. It's the contrast of the air masses. So there we are Saturday morning. Notice lots of moisture up in here, but the main rain event is going to be associated with the storm up in there on Saturday. Okay, now let's take a look at the wind, because the wind is going to be the issue here. Notice there are two areas of wind, one here along the Carolina coast Saturday morning, according to the current forecast, and that's related to the storm itself. And then this is the wind related to the high pressure here, which we saw on the satellite, just pushing in from the east, pushing that water against the coast. I imagine the sounds by the Outer Banks, Pamlico Sound is really going to be rocking there, and elevated water in the downwind side of the sound, which is going to change as we go. Okay, here we are Saturday evening, and now we're starting to get, notice we're getting reds in here. The reds are 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts pushing in toward the coast, and not quite Saturday evening to most of the Outer Banks, but all this is pushing north as we go here, up there here where Mike is, no problem quite yet Saturday evening, but the winds are going to be picking up as the storm intensifies and moves to the north. Okay, here it comes now. Sunday, now the strong winds are all the way from New England, all the way down to the Tidewater. The lower Chesapeake Bay is likely to have significant flooding, maybe major flooding there. And then along the coast, as Mike was talking about, there along the Maryland coast, the Jersey Shore, anywhere where this northeast wind can pile water against the coast, push it in the inlets, and so forth. And here you see yellows in here now. Now we're gusting up into the 50 to 60 mile per hour range. And that's the forecast for gusts up to 60 miles an hour along this coastline or just offshore. But most of this effect is going to be right along the coastline and maybe a few miles inland, and then it'll be breezy other than that. But notice it's Sunday morning, it's pushing toward New England, not quite there yet. And then we go to Sunday evening and or Monday morning, and now it's all the way up to the Cape and the islands. And look at the yellows here. This Sunday night into Monday on the Jersey Shore looks like the worst time. It's going parallel with Long Island, so that'll push water in Long Island Sound, but along the coast you're not going to get the push inland. But this could be a significant beach erosion problem along the Long Island beaches, not to mention on the beaches that are getting blasted by the direct impact of those winds. And look, if this storm comes out like this, we're up in the 60, maybe even a little higher gusts there right at the coast. So that's huge. And then on Tuesday, it kind of backs off and things still blowing and still a little nasty. Looks like Tuesday morning, but a weaker storm. But now it's sitting over warmer water, and maybe this front dissipates and this actually becomes tropical enough to get a name. It's not going to affect the impacts because the impacts are going to be letting up on Tuesday. Probably sometime Tuesday it'll really be noticeably better. But notice if it does this, it'll back up over warmer water and might have an opportunity to get a name. We'll compete with that system in the northern Atlantic for the Karen or the next name, and probably neither will get it, but that's a maybe. But again, doesn't affect the fact that this is a strong coastal storm. So we have coastal flood warnings and advisories all up and down the coast here, and these are all going to change as the storm develops. So anybody that lives near the coast has boats or marine interests or beach interests or anything needs to stay in close touch with these various sorts of advisories. Tomorrow afternoon, by the way, in Charleston, high tide is supposed to peak in the major flood range. So this is going to be, that looks like the peak for Charleston before it moves to the north. And then we have all the way up to New England. Coastal flood watch, which will turn into warnings if the storm develops as forecast, all the way up from the Delmarva all the way to the Cape and the islands and the South Shore and Boston up to Newburyport. So lots to talk about. Mike Seidel, good to have you back.
I'm back. I'm in a sec.
So where you are, what do they have, a coastal flood watch in effect?
Yes, they have one in advance of the storm.
Right.
So that is in advance of what's going to happen. High tides, by the way, on Sunday or early afternoon. I checked Rehoboth Beach, and it's about 1 o'clock on Sunday. And Sunday, I think Sunday night's going to be the worst from the wind and tide perspective. But we're still going to have issues Monday, leftover wind and more beach erosion and wave action. It'll be interesting to see if the wave heights and the impact is worse in Aaron. I suspect it will be because with Aaron, they had some moderate coastal flooding, Jersey Shore south, and we know the Outer Banks had overwash on Highway 12. This was with Aaron, not last week with Imelda when the houses fell in Buxton.
Right. Yeah. And different issues going on there. Aaron put so much energy in the water. I mean, this is real storm surge. This is wind-driven water, different than, because Aaron didn't have those strong onshore winds. It was the energy from the storm pushing the water toward the coast.
Yeah, and I noticed on the forecast discussion this morning before I went to the airport in Atlanta that the Weather Service is talking about 1 to 3 feet of inundation at this point. So that's kind of their early surge forecast on the Maryland, Delaware, even Jersey Shore. Basically, the southern half of New Jersey earlier on, but now, I mean, it's the whole coast is in play for some kind of impacts. We just don't know where that storm's going to end up at this point. By the way, the next storm on the list is Lorenzo.
All right, that's right, Lorenzo. Good. All right, so if they both get named, we have a Karen and a Lorenzo. Otherwise, we have neither. So anyway, it's just the way it works out in the timing. Who knows what the timing is going to be? Yeah, because New Jersey is shaped like that, right? So that the southern part of New Jersey faces a little bit southeast, the northern part faces a little bit northeast. And so if we get a nor'easter up at Seabright and Asbury Park and on down in that northern half of New Jersey, they can have big flooding issues there. Obviously, although they have taken steps to try and mitigate some of that. But I mean, this is a healthy storm. All right, so let's check in with Jordan Overton at Fox Weather Headquarters, New York. We have any questions coming in yet, Jordan?
Yeah, we do. We have some questions coming in. We're going to start right into the nor'easter, and then we have a couple of tropical questions. So the first question on the nor'easter: would a cruise make it to Bermuda from New Jersey this weekend?
Ooh.
I would think that they would either cancel the cruise or divert it. But I mean, the good thing about the cruise industry is they know what they're doing. They're not going to lose a cruise ship. They're not going to endanger anybody. So just stay in touch with your cruise line because it's going to be nasty out there.
I can tell you what happened with Aaron, which went up the coast and didn't hit the coast. A friend of mine's friend was going out of New York City to Bermuda. This is back in late August with Aaron. They were supposed to sail on Thursday out of New York City, and they didn't leave until Saturday morning because of the swell Thursday and Friday. And when they left Saturday morning, they went north towards Nova Scotia. They never made it to Bermuda. So your cruise line should keep you updated, but there was no way they're going to be sailing out of New York City on Saturday. Well, Saturday or Sunday, or even, and then you got the swell from Jerry coming towards you from the other direction. So there's all kinds of issues there with sailing, and you'll just have to keep in touch with your cruise company. But there will be certainly interruptions cruising out of that part of the East Coast this weekend.
Yeah, because it's not just the swell in this case, it's really the wind. I mean, if you have 50, 60 mile an hour winds, I mean, who'd want to cruise in that anyway, in a nasty storm. And I think they're forecasting 20-foot seas or anyway, big seas, right? Offshore.
Yeah, the marine forecast I looked at early this morning was 12 to 18 footers. That's from the coast to 20 miles offshore. So all beyond that, they'll probably be higher.
Higher,
probably not as high. The highest wave height I saw with Aaron was the Hatteras buoy offshore by about 175 miles, and they peaked that morning at about 45 feet. That was the highest wave height I saw that close to the coast at that point in Aaron's track.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is not cruising weather for sure. No question about that. All right, Jordan.
Next question, when I come in, there's a lot of talk about uncertainty. We don't know where it's going to go, some confusion in the track. So the question here is it really going to happen, or is it just a possibility?
I think it's very likely that the storm's going to happen. Exactly the impacts in each place is the open question, because it depends on where the center of the track and the direction of the winds in any one location affects how much water gets pushed into that location. Mike, what's your experience with things like this?
At this point, I can't imagine we're not going to have some kind of impacts from North Carolina up into Long Island at minimum. I know in the winter we have to get the jet streams to phase, to get the low to form, and to get a big East Coast snowstorm. And 4 or 5 days out, it looks like, hey, this is going to be one of these, lights out on I-95. And then as we get closer, either the jet streams don't phase or they phase late and the storm blows up well off the coast. Right. In this case, we're not dealing with the same dynamics. And my gut is there's going to be some kind of weather and impacts this weekend from Cape Hatteras, Virginia Beach, here in Maryland and Delaware, and up through the Jersey Shore, South Shore, Long Island. Whether they go farther north up to Cape Cod, direct impacts remains to be seen. But it is already Thursday afternoon, and the first rain and wind is supposed to impact the Outer Banks later Saturday. Rain's supposed to get in here sometime by Sunday morning, and then all bets are off on how bad it could be, but certainly 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts are not out of the question. But again, it's just a matter of where it develops and how close to the coast it is and how strong it is. The GFS has had a much lower pressure in the past couple of runs than the European.
Yeah. So anyway, there's variables, but it is more than a possibility. I would call it a probability of significant impacts. We don't know if there will be tremendous impacts and devastating impacts in some places. But it's not impossible. I mean, these are coasts that a lot of this coastline is not really used to wind gusts up to like hurricane strength for an extended period of time. It's because this storm is going to be slow. A couple of days of strong winds in the Jersey Shore, that's a lot. We'll just have to see how it comes together. And I think obviously the forecast should gel once the storm starts forming, which it should start forming tomorrow, actually.
Yeah, if we get 60-mile-an-hour plus wind gusts on the coast, there's going to be some power outages.
Yes.
And there may be some gusts to 50 miles an hour as far inland as certainly the Garden State Parkway, even maybe to I-95 and the Jersey Turnpike. We'll see. But certainly that's the way it looks right now. We're two days out from it starting to develop down off the coast of the Carolinas, Georgia and the Carolinas.
Yeah, the other thing that'll come with this is coastal rain. Doesn't extend very far inland, but it's a good thing, actually. The rain will be a good thing because all the way from New England south, this has been a pretty droughty year in most of that area. So nobody's going to complain about rain in New York or in New England or even on down the coast. Has it been kind of a drought there, Mike, in Maryland?
Yeah, it's been pretty dry mid to late summer. The corn crop has come in pretty nice. I saw a lot of it's been harvested, but I did see some more today. And I was home in June, July, and last month, early September, around Labor Day, and the corn looks pretty good. They got enough rain, much like in Atlanta. We had a lot of rain in May and June, into mid-July, and then since mid-August, it basically hasn't rained at all in the southeast, unless you've been lucky to get a thunderstorm. But my gauge, I had 1.11 about 3 weeks ago, and that was the only significant rain I'd had since August 24th, now through October 9th. So it's been very dry down there. Fortunately, it is cooling off, so the evapotranspiration is lower. And because the temperatures aren't as hot, the days are shorter. So it's not as critical as if it was the middle of the summer, but it's still something we need to keep the water table up and keep the aquifers full, in the whole area.
Yeah, all the rain has been here in South Florida, where it's
that's
been
true.
Crazy thunderstorms day after day after, because the fronts have all been settling over Florida. So the southern part of the state has been in the tropical air nonstop without ever really getting a break for more than part of a day, seems like. And so and with a west to east flow, so thunderstorms that develop have moved to the East Coast here since August, really. It's been very stormy.
I haven't looked today, but what's the potential for your dew point going below, say, 75 with this front? Is the front clearing South Florida?
The front is going to clear South Florida. I think the dew point is going to be in the 60s for the first time. This will be a real fall front here, maybe even push 60 on Monday-ish, something like that. Yeah. So anytime it gets below 75, I'm happy, but this will be nice. Jordan?
All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We've talked about the nor'easter, but of course we have a lot of people asking about hurricanes questions. So this question here coming in from LinkedIn, a reminder, we're on all the platforms everywhere, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, everything. Can you elaborate on your comment today that the hurricane season might be over for Southwest Florida? Thanks. Obviously, I have a couple of other comments on TikTok too saying, where are the hurricanes? They're supposed to be an above average season. Nothing's been happening. What's going on?
Okay, well, I didn't specify Southwest Florida. I think I talked about South Florida in general. But the idea is that we're going to have a robust cold front come through. And so nothing is going to happen while that's in the area. And behind that, there's another kind of dip in the jet stream, which will kind of reinforce that. And then behind that, the indications are that we're going to have a big high pressure area kind of over the Gulf in Florida in this area. And so the mechanism that gets storms going in October, which is this Central American low pressure system called the Central American Gyre, that it will be suppressed to the south. It's kind of pushed on over the Pacific. So the mechanism isn't there, and high pressure is kind of in this area. Now, does that mean the hurricane season is over completely? No, I wouldn't say that because there's a decent chance to get always a decent chance in that kind of a scenario to get something in the Caribbean, in the southern Caribbean. The question is whether it can come north, and there are in the foreseeable future no mechanisms to bring it north that I see. So that's why I said it's a maybe. It's not 100%. We're only on the 9th of October. I don't know, Mike, you have thoughts about that?
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
shutting down the Gulf, that big high pressure, great weather,
Mhm.
cooler and drier. Well, remember in 2020, the COVID year, we were covering storms into November. I was down in St. Pete for a tropical storm, and at that point, we were in the Greek alphabet, and it was
Right.
about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So it can happen, but certainly when you get past mid-October, it's hard to get anything to make landfall north of the Outer Banks. The only one that comes to mind in recent memory was Hurricane Hazel in 1954. And we had
Yeah.
Sandy in 2012, which became non-tropical as it made landfall in Jersey. But it is really tough to get something to come that far north, tropical-wise, because we are getting into the time of the year where the jet stream dips south, and we're going to see that over the next week or so. And the
Yeah.
weather, it couldn't be better. I mean, this morning was 25 degrees up at Saranac Lake. A little frosty
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah. Well, they've got freeze warnings outside of New York City for tonight. So
Yep.
it's definitely a seasonal change, and we're standing by here in South Florida for it to happen. Yeah, Hurricane Hazel was really a freak storm. I mean, it came out of the deep tropics and then
Right.
hit North Carolina as an extremely strong, in fact, the strongest storm for the time of year ever to
It
get
here
that far
too.
north. Yeah, yes, and my oldest memory is Hurricane Hazel, actually, that knocked out the power in New Jersey where I was living.
Oh, you're that old?
Yeah,
I
I'm
didn't know
that
that.
old. Yeah, I'm that
Wow.
old. Uh, yes, I was thrilled. My mother was horrified that the power went out, and my father was out on a business trip. But yes, that's what I remember from Hurricane Hazel, and when it affected the whole Northeast, the Hurricane Hazel set the modern record that still stands for the strongest wind ever measured in New York City. At the Battery, they used to measure winds. I think it was in the Whitehall building down on the Battery. It was kind of elevated. 113 miles an hour, I think,
Wow.
from Hurricane Hazel. Anyway, yeah. So yes, there are reasonable odds that the hurricane season for Florida and for the U.S. is over, but we can't really project more than a couple of weeks. And there are storms like Nicole that come out of a weird kind of non-tropical kind of disturbance. They get involved and some kind of weird things happen. That happened in November a few years ago. So never can absolutely say something like that can't occur. All right, Jordan.
All right, next question coming in. We're going to switch back to the nor'easter here really quick. I'm getting some questions from Cape Cod in Connecticut, parts of New England. I'm going to pop this one up here. Is my area in Connecticut going to get impacts there in eastern Connecticut? But I'm also getting some questions on TikTok from Cape Cod about what specifically can they expect there.
Well, do you know the forecast for Cape Cod, Mike? You want to look that up real quick while I bring up
Yeah, they're going to be pretty far north.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean
they're going
they've
to have
got
wave
strong winds.
action,
The model up
and they'll
there
have some.
is pretty spectacular.
They're going to
I
have some.
mean,
They're going to have wind.
yeah,
I don't know if they're going to have. Certainly, they're not going to have the impacts they're going to have Long Island South
right, exactly. Yeah, but there you
by
can see
far.
it on
There it is.
the map. So you see, this is the computer forecast. Kind of imagining
Is that the
here.
model blend? What is
No,
that?
this is the European.
And what? Oh, of course, that's Tuesday. It goes away, but it
Well,
gets
here,
up
let me put this back on Monday.
Cape May, and then
But you can see it's really
well,
south of Cape Cod for the strongest winds. But I mean, those are still gusts up to the
I bet they.
40 to 50 range
Oh yeah,
on the outer Cape and the islands
Nantucket.
there. So
Yeah.
not insignificant.
No, no, no. You got this monster height in the north. The reason for all the cold weather and
Right.
the freezing temperatures, and the combination between the low and the high, they're going to be channeling. That's going to be channeling the wind right into coastal sections of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and also the islands and Cape Cod.
Yeah. So now talking about Eastern Connecticut, so it really depends on whether you're talking about at the coast, or where exactly are you talking about? So, if you're on Long Island Sound, no doubt the sound is going to be agitated, but the wind is going to be from the east, and so that tends to pile the water up in the western end of Long Island Sound, like over by LaGuardia Airport, and so forth. You're not going to get the situation where you have kind of southeasterly winds pushing the water against the coast, as can happen there. So the Connecticut coast is not like a high threat zone, but it certainly can be windy right at the coastline. It looks like, if the storm really develops. Of course, where you see it there on the model, actually what we've done there is we've used the European model to depict the winds and the National Weather Service's location of where they were predicting the low center would be. So, it could just as easily be a little offshore, a little different place. It would change the direction of the winds slightly. So, you're going to experience the storm in eastern Connecticut, but you shouldn't get the direct impacts like in the Jersey Shore or someplace, the Maryland shore, for example.
The National Weather Service already has a coastal flood watch out for the Cape and the islands starting Sunday morning,
to Monday,
and it goes through Tuesday, early Tuesday morning, and they're forecasting gusts 50 miles an hour plus, and it's going to be raining, and temperatures are going to be, I was saying Sunday night, Monday, 50s and 60s.
Right.
So there'll be definitely a lot of wind up there. And probably some power outages on the Cape, I would suspect, at least a few.
Imagine. Yeah, and I imagine that's going to be the case up and down the coast, actually, with these kind of winds. All right, Jordan?
Yeah, next question coming in. It's actually on TikTok. It's a good question about, we're calling this a nor'easter. They've seen that in the headlines, but there's no snow. So why are we calling this a nor'easter when there's no snow? So maybe you guys can elaborate on the definition of a nor'easter.
A nor'easter doesn't imply snow, right, Brian?
Right. But a nor'easter implies that the strongest winds are from the northeast. That's why it got called a nor'easter, just from experience. When you have a coastal storm, that's where you get where the winds really converge and the strongest band comes in from the northeast. If you're on the Jersey Shore, for example, and they tend to be the nastiest winds, tend to be the wettest, coldest, ugliest weather comes from the northeast, so that's why it's called nor'easter.
And the northeast wind tends to be an eroding wind as far as the beaches go versus a southeast wind, but it won't be long. Now, we have had snow and nor'easters, well, gosh, early mid-November, but it's really early. The water is so warm, even out here in Ocean City, the water temperature is still in the low 70s, so it would be almost impossible. Buffalo had a big storm October 8 or 9 years ago, mid-October. Leaves are on the trees. They lost thousands of trees from a heavy wet snow, but that was not a nor'easter. But a nor'easter, as Brian mentioned, does not imply snow. But one thing we haven't seen a lot of in recent winters are big I-95 snowstorms. It's been a while since we've had one that really blanketed DC to Boston. Maybe this winter for you snow lovers out there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it hasn't been that cold. It just it's been amazingly warm in the Northeast. All right, Jordan. That's a good question, though, because
that's a great question.
That in this context, we debated on. I'd been debating when I was writing, do I call it a nor'easter or do I call it a coastal storm? And I settled on coastal storm. But I mean, it is both. Both names apply.
Another question coming in from TikTok. Very, very active audience today. They are wondering about, would this become a tropical system? If it does, would we all of a sudden get like tropical storm warnings? Would it like all of a sudden be like, oh no, tropical storm warnings, tropical storm watches? How does that process work? And how does that change the impacts that all of a sudden it's a tropical system?
Okay, so it's a good question. Here, let me see if I can bring up the map that I was showing. Okay, here we go. So the idea is that on Tuesday, the storm is forecast, now this is just a forecast at this point, to back away from the coast and go south. So if you notice what the water temperatures are there, you see that the the line right here. This is the Gulf Stream right here. This is warm water. But then as soon as you get north of it, that's cool water. So as long as the system is up in there, it's not likely to get rid of its fronts. So to be termed tropical, first of all, can't have any fronts attached to it. And it needs to be over warm enough water that it develops thunderstorms around the center. So yes, so that's why I put this map in there. On Tuesday, you notice there's only this sort of lingering occluded front here, it's called. But anyway, that's kind of a fading front. So if it were to sit out here over that warm water, it could become tropical, but by that time, it's far enough away from the coast and moving away, so you won't get the warnings and watches and whatnot if that all plays out. If for some reason it sank due south and ended up over the Gulf Stream off of North Carolina and was affecting the coast, then yeah, they would then put up everything would be tropical storm warnings and so forth. Right now they have gale warnings and storm warnings. A gale warning is the same as a tropical storm warning, means over 40 miles an hour, but a storm warning means over almost 60 miles an hour, 58 miles per hour. Right. So they have those for the coastal waters there along the northeast coast.
I think first we need to worry about where the storm's going to be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right.
Don't get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So this is 5 days in advance, and just like with any other kind of developing low pressure system, future forecasts can put it in definitely in a different place. This is where the National Hurricane Center, or not the Hurricane Center, actually, the National Weather Service has it right now.
And I tell my friends around here that 5 days is an eternity when you're dealing with a nor'easter.
Exactly.
I mean, how many times on Monday do we think, oh, it's going to be, the 95, the cities are going to get dumped on by Friday and Saturday, and then, 3 days later, the jet streams don't phase, the storm blows off the coast. And so even though we're closer than that and we're not dealing with snow, it's still a tough forecast on how severe the impacts are going to be. We know we're going to have
all
impacts.
We can do is talk about what if the forecast is right, this looks like the reasonable worst case that we need to be ready for, and then fine tune that as we go. I've just noticed that we have the new advisory on Tropical Storm Jerry, 65 miles per hour, pressure's up 1 millibar, and tropical storm warnings in effect for those islands. No changes there. And it's about 175 miles east-southeast of the northern Leeward Islands. So it's well offshore, moving west-northwest at 18 miles per hour. So the storm is going to track by, looks like, offshore of the islands with the bad weather on the other side of the storm. So a brush from the center of the storm, but then the tail of the storm looks likely to bring heavy rain over those islands. So still, it's going to be after the center goes by that the weather will deteriorate in the Northeast Caribbean, maybe as far west as the Virgin Islands. So
I'm gonna jump in really quick, Brian. We actually just got a comment as you were talking about that from Paul watching from St. John's, Virgin Islands. So maybe we can talk about the impact for Paul with this new advisory.
Yeah, so no impact directly from the new advisory. The information is the same. It's really the tail of the storm that once it goes by. So it's going to go by well to your east. It's going to go by to the east of Anguilla and Barbuda and Antigua. And then I was just looking at the model here, and let me just see what the moisture shows and see what the shape of the tail is. So it looks like in St. John, if you're going to get it, it's going to be tomorrow late into Saturday, and then probably improving on Sunday. Drier air pushing in. Looks like the best opportunity for you to get significant rainfall there, but it doesn't look like this will be extremely threatening.
And I noticed NHC hasn't changed their forecast for intensity. Right. Still topping it out at a Cat 1, 80 miles an hour. And they bring it up to minimal hurricane intensity Saturday afternoon. So none of that has really changed.
Right. And that's past the islands and still curving out to sea.
And curving away from Bermuda.
Yeah. So all good news really on Jerry today. Better than than even we thought it might have been. We never thought it was going to be too bad. All right, Jordan.
We'll stay in the tropics. We're going to get this comment from Deanna. Going to, you guys should probably pronounce it better than I can, on the 22nd.
Playa del Carmen, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Anything brewing out there?
No,
I wouldn't think so. No, looks about as good as it can be, I guess. I don't know whether they're going to be south of the front. Going on the 22nd. Well, it's too far in advance to know whether you're going to get the drier air, or because the dry air is going to make it down there, but probably not to stay by the 22nd. I don't know about that. But anyway, no obvious systems at this point.
Yep.
All right. Next
we're
question.
talking about 2 weeks from now, though.
Well, you asked me, Brian, earlier about my field coverage. I never got to answer that because the Zoom application either didn't like the question or wasn't behaving. But I forgot the question now. Something about.
Well, I was saying that you I know you count up your storms, your number of hurricanes or whatever. Do you count your like deployments as well?
Well, I'm just looking at my records right now. Since 1996, I'm standing at 26,059 live shots. So I've added them all up. I started counting them, never imagining that I would be doing this in the year 2025.
Yeah.
I have now, I think with Imelda, that's 104 named systems, named tropical storms or hurricanes since 96. So they add up, but a lot of live shots, and I'll likely be doing a few more on Sunday and Monday on the coast here with the wind and the rain. And I thought about my short sleeve fox weather polo shirts. I packed them anyway, but I think they're not going to be coming to fruition because it is going to be wet and well, coolish. It's not going to be one of these systems where it's 75 to 80 and raining. It's definitely going to be in the 60s with this system.
65 and raining and windy.
Yeah.
More likely, yeah.
So I've been adding them up, and I don't know how many times I've been deployed. That's one thing I didn't keep a record of. One year I kept a record of how many pieces of salmon I had on the road. And it was like 110. It was ridiculous. Because you go to a hotel restaurant, and I eat healthy, and they have the obligatory salmon that's probably been frozen for a month, and then they bring it out to you. But anyway, all kinds of odds and ends.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what I would do without the salmon either. It's just so often the thing that you look at all that stuff and you go, okay, the salmon. It's got to be the salmon. That's all there is.
Oh yeah, and one of my, I've got a million stories, but we were ordering breakfast after some tropical coverage maybe about 15 years ago. And we were at a restaurant, and everybody ordered, the photographer and the crew. And then I ordered, and I said I'd like to have some scrambled egg whites and some toast. And the bless her soul, the waitress said she'd have to check in the kitchen to see if they had any egg whites. And then she came out, and she was so happy. "We've got the egg whites, sir." And I said, "That's great. I'll look forward to eating them." But all kinds of interesting stories from the road, thousands of miles flown and driven in the past 30 years.
Yeah, and the technology. You and I have been at this and. For all these years, to see the technology change, as it has, it's just stunning.
When I started in the mid 90s, the only way I could call work was to pull over to a payphone. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a cell phone. And then when I did live shots, I was corded. I mean, I was mic'd up from the sat truck. My IFB, my hearing piece was hardwired. So I was tethered by two lines. None of it was wireless at that point. And then, you couldn't really move around, and you were tied to a satellite truck. The last time I've been in a satellite truck was the day before Hurricane Harvey came into Texas in 2017. So I have not broadcast from a satellite truck in 8 years. Now we use the backpack technology called Live View or TVU, which has cell phone cards. And it's kind of like cell phone, how great it was to have cell phones come to fruition with broadcast coverage, because now we can go out there and walk around on the beach or in the snow, and we're not limited by the cable. I mean, I can tell you the times that I'd walk away and try to show something, and be jerked back because I was tied down to the cables. So things have really changed. When I started, the internet was just coming out, but we didn't have smartphones. We got the flip phones. There was still no internet in the mid to late 90s. And you'd have to call, I'd have to call my former employer and, talk to meteorologists. What's the latest? You had no way to get any of this information. And now, you've got it, on your phone, and you've got it on your laptop.
When Hurricane Andrew was approaching, I had to call the National Hurricane Center to see what the latest was and what was the thinking. And I did that Saturday morning, and that's what started me on the mission. I ran to the TV station, and then all that started from there. I went on TV and kind of never stopped for a number of days after that. That was the Saturday.
And the weather maps
the Sunday
too.
night. Yeah, right. So
you had to go to work to see the weather maps.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would, if I really had to find out, like in the case of Andrew, I called the Hurricane Center and asked them what the latest maps were. And because that Friday afternoon I had hovered over what was called a Difax, the slowest printer there ever was.
Yes.
And hovered over that, waiting for the afternoon AVN, which is the GFS, to come in to see what the high pressure was forecast to be sprawled over the Carolinas. And it was forecast to be super strong. And that convinced me that this storm could come to South Florida. And that started all my forecasting that Friday.
And speaking of Difax, the only time I've ever seen a Difax machine in a movie was in the movie Airplane. Watch closely. They'll pull off the map, and it was kind of a wet paper, and it would dry and become kind of crunchy.
Right.
And I remember working in local TV, and the other meteorologists there accidentally set the weather office on fire because a cigarette ignited the Difax maps, which were very flammable. It was just like dry, crunchy paper. I mean, he put it out with his hand, but when I saw the Difax machine in Airplane, I was like, oh my gosh. And, people around me, what did I miss?
Yeah. It was a different world. But
Different
remember
era.
that we didn't really have smartphones until the late 2000s. The iPhone came out in 2007. So, usually I think it was about 2009 that we kind of had them. So it was that late to actually have, and even then we didn't really have good maps on the phone because you didn't have good internet. The internet wasn't great everywhere and all that.
3G.
Yeah, 3G, right.
3G, and it would take you. It was kind of like the cell phone version of dial-up, and you'd see the map.
Yeah.
You'd request a map and go eat dinner, come back, and it would have come in.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jordan, what you got?
Yeah, so first I just wanted to point out this comment from Steve. He says, been watching you both forever. Always enjoy your expertise insights. So
definitely
nice
forever,
Steve, from Steve
sure.
there.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, so our next question, we're going to get back into the nor'easter a little bit. Will there be a high wind watch in the Bronx or Manhattan or wind advisories? Now, I should mention we do have a high wind watch for coastal parts of Long Island and coastal New Jersey that has been issued. But did you guys anticipate more into Manhattan, or what do you think?
I think they'll put it up for Manhattan because of the high rises. It might not be down on the street.
Yes, we're getting a pretty good gust here. I'd say 40 to 45 miles an hour. Some of the.
Yeah. So were you looking it up to see what they're?
I'm looking it up right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So So that would be my anticipation. I mean, it's going to be windy in New York, and remember, the higher above yet. What is that? What is that we're hearing, Jordan? Is that coming from Mike?
My phone was on autoplay. Sorry about that. It was me. It was me doing a live shot in 1996.
Oh yeah, I thought it sounded.
I don't know why that autoplayed, but I'm looking. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. But in any case, yes, because of obviously the buildings stick up in Manhattan, and the wind is stronger above the ground. You don't have the friction and so forth. Though I would be surprised if they don't put up maybe a high wind, at least a high wind advisory, if not, or a wind advisory, I guess, or a high wind warning. I would think if they're going to get 50 or 60 mile an hour winds, then a loft, you know, you can get stronger than that if blowing through those buildings. I would think that you're going to get warnings there.
Yeah,
I
they
would
got
think.
the watch out. I was driving. This came out at 2 o'clock Eastern for Long Island and Nassau and Suffolk, Long Island, also Queens and Brooklyn. This is Sunday afternoon through late Sunday night. Gust up to 60 miles an hour.
All
So
right, so
that's
Queens and Brooklyn, it means that's the coastal
coastal
section.
areas.
So the coastal parts of New York, down the Rockaways
Yeah,
and out to the beaches there.
but
That's
but
Queens and Brooklyn.
three
But
days in advance.
yes, right. But and
That
they put it up, they said, to coordinating with local offices, so they didn't have some kind of discontinuity up the coast where
right.
they were talking about it here and then not talking about it there, and which was good. That's very good communications. That's great. But I'll be surprised if they don't expand it to Manhattan at least, and maybe have an advisory in the Bronx.
Um, Mount Holly, Philadelphia, has also put it up Sunday morning through afternoon. Damaging winds could blow down trees. Talking wind gust 30 to 40, gust to 60. So basically, from Cape May all the way out to Montauk. Let me check my area since I'm here and I haven't had a chance. Yes, they have a high wind watch out now for Delaware, which is handled by Mount Holly
Mhm.
and also the Philadelphia office. Let me check here in Maryland. We're handled by nothing yet.
Okay.
Let me check the coast here.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Well, let me get in closer. Let me put in Ocean City, but there's nothing
Actually,
inland.
I think on our map it populated.
Ocean City, Maryland has just a rip current statement for tomorrow, but nothing about wind for
Hmm,
Sunday at this point. That comes out of Wakefield, which
right.
is down in Virginia, but they have not put anything out of. In fact, the beach hazard statement for rip currents for tomorrow was put out this is from 3:40 this morning. So I can't imagine they won't put out a high wind watch for the Maryland coast, also Virginia Beach, the Maryland Eastern Shore, and Virginia Beach area at
Yeah,
some
because
point.
they're talking about flood potential in the lower Chesapeake Bay. I mean,
Right.
significant flood potential because, you know, 3 feet above the normal high tide there. That's a lot of land gets inundated with 3 feet of water. So there is kind of a discontinuity there. If they're going to have that much wind and surge, you would think they would have some kind of wind alert. I don't know why they wouldn't. So, all right. Well, anyway, we'll see what the update is. The bottom line is everywhere along the coast has the threat of high winds and maybe the bigger effect of this erosion and violent surf coming in. All right, Jordan.
Looking at their forecast discussion from Wakefield, Virginia, which covers Maryland, Virginia Eastern Shore, and also Southeast Tidewater. And they're saying concern for this period is the wind, currently forecasting wind gusts 45 to 55 plus along the coast. Cannot rule out high wind warnings or wind advisories at this point. So they're not ruling it out. They just haven't put them out yet.
Okay. All right. So they
Yes,
didn't go to the
tomorrow.
watch. Remember, all we have up there on the northern coast is all watches.
Watches.
And it's kind of a philosophical thing. How early do you want to do it since we have the uncertainty of exactly what's going to happen? So they're thinking, okay, let's just, because it has the potential to be really extreme and it's a weekend, you know, people might be thinking about boating or whatever. So they want to, you know, get people aware that there is a threat ahead of time. That's kind of the philosophy.
And
All right,
three
Jordan.
days is not the
Unusual.
norm.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jordan.
So our next question, yeah, we'll keep it going. So I have a couple of questions in specifically from Philadelphia. Are we expecting any winds, heavy rain? What's the forecast looking like for Philadelphia?
Yep.
For the city of Philadelphia, yeah, you'll feel it. You know, there's a storm out there if the storm materializes as we've been talking about, but the bigger effects will be in New Jersey. Let me just look and see what what's called the QPF, the rain total for Philly. Yeah, so you know they've got 2 to 3 inches of rain for eastern Pennsylvania, but 3 to 5 inches of rain for the eastern half of New Jersey and all the way down the coast. So this is a real coastal event. I would think it's unlikely that this would provide any kind of disruptive or threatening weather in the city of Philadelphia. What do you think, Mike?
No. but I do think there'll be some significant issues at LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark on Sunday. So
Yeah.
if you're flying anywhere in the U.S. into the tri-state area, those three major airports, when you have winds like that, there is going to be a lot of disruptions. Then throw in the issues we have with air traffic control and the government shutdown. So if you're flying Sunday in and out of New York City, be prepared for delays and even cancellations. You have 50, 60 mile an hour winds at LaGuardia. That's from that direction across the runway.
Yeah, and Boston as well, as a matter of fact, because Logan is so precarious anyway, and I think they have runway construction going on at Logan, which is slowing everything down already and limits what they can do. So, yeah, anywhere in the Northeast, and yeah, especially in the Northeast, and I imagine Norfolk will have issues, maybe DC as well, but that's far enough inland that the airport, I'm sure, won't close, but it might disrupt some flights.
Yeah, if I could just jump in really quick, that triggered a couple of questions from a couple of people. Which airports what about DC airports, Philadelphia airports? Like, what airports are we looking at being impacted with possible delays?
The top airports, as Bryan mentioned, Logan, the three New York City airports, and then after that, the next step down would be Philly, BWI, Reagan National, and then Norfolk.
Yeah.
Could be, maybe Norfolk. I should say Norfolk is probably more so, but again, it's not a as busy as those airports I also already mentioned. But
yeah, but the big threats are really in the Northeast because because if the storm develops this way, it's really North Jersey and even up to New England. But that blast of air at the peak of the storm is New Jersey and South Shore of Long Island. So obviously that's going to affect the tri-state airports.
Yeah, and LaGuardia, Newark, and Logan are on the water. So
right.
There's nothing to slow the wind down. Look, the wind's going to be coming right in at LaGuardia across Long Island Sound from the northeast.
Right, and well, Kennedy, of course, is on the water, but the wind is coming off the land there. Right, Jordan.
Yeah, so here's a bit of a science question for both of you coming in. The question is, it's two-phase. Number one, on weather maps, wind maps, it seems like the strongest winds are always not on land and in the ocean. Why is it that it looks like that? And then the second part of that question is on TikTok. Why is it that all of a sudden the winds drop off when you go inland from the coast?
All right, well, so it's the friction of the air over the water is a lot less than it is over the land where you have a rough surface. As a matter of fact, the technical word is roughness that you can actually calculate. But here's the thing, that over the water, the gusts are not as high. So let's say you have 100-mile-an-hour winds. We're not going to have 100-mile-an-hour winds with this storm, but just for round numbers. You have 100-mile-an-hour winds. Nominally over the water, the gusts are at 120. If you have 100-mile-an-hour winds over the land, nominally the gusts are 140, but you can have what's called a gust factor, a multiplier, up to 2 or even higher in some hurricanes. So you can get significantly higher gusts over the land because there's a randomness to the interaction with the trees and the terrain and the buildings and everything else that makes the land rough. So it lowers the wind speed, the sustained wind speed, but it raises the gusts to the point that the National Hurricane Center is talking more about gusts inland than talking about sustained wind. After Hurricane Helene last year did all that damage in Augusta and North Georgia from gusts, the winds indeed it was windy, but the gust factors were super high and did a lot of damage. Where were you in Helene, Mike? What's your experience with that?
I was down in Florida.
Oh yeah, okay.
At Perry. I never.
That's right. I remember you being in Perry. I remember being on the air with you in Perry.
In fact, Josh Warman and the Dow, they were at the airport there, and the winds weren't that strong. I mean, they were strong, right. But it was people were still wondering what was going on because they didn't get an incredible amount of wind.
Right.
But I did not get up to North Carolina. I was there and then I came home. But that was the second time I was in that area. I was in Steenhatchee for Debbie,
Mm-hmm.
and then in that general area for Helene. And then Milton, I was over just south of near St. Pete. I think Milton's anniversary is tomorrow, I believe, or Sunday.
Today, actually.
10th or
Yeah,
11th.
that's right.
Yeah, today, actually. Mm-hmm.
Today?
Of the 9th.
Wow.
Thank you, Jordan.
I think it's today. Let me double check, but I think it's today.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, Helene was an interesting storm, but it was so large that if you got in a band, that meant that when you have a huge storm, well, Wilma was an example of this, that if you get in that strong band blows and blows and blows and blows because it's almost linear, right? It's almost like a derecho, but
Yeah.
a elongated, along the derecho, so to speak. And because the diameter was so big, in those bands, you had super strong, persistent winds way inland. But if you were in between the bands, there wasn't that much wind. And I think the Perry Airport was an example of just not being in the strongest wind
that's
corridor.
a good point.
Yeah, yeah. Jordan?
Yeah, so just confirming that it was 1 year ago today when Milton was making landfall. So today's the anniversary.
And that was such a people don't appreciate how weird a storm that was. You don't have hurricanes like that coming west to east in that west to east. Yes, they come from the south and bend to the east in October. In fact, that's how most October storms hit Florida in that way. But do kind of starting in the Gulf and making a beeline for the Florida coast, that was an unusual weather pattern.
Remember the track forecast day or two before, we thought those winds are going to hit Atlanta, which is basically a city in a forest.
Yes.
And it would have been a lot worse than Opal was back in early October of '95. But for Atlanta, the worst was the rainfall. But then the strongest winds shifted east to the river, Savannah River, and then ended up in North Carolina, Greenville. Some of my friends in Greenville, where I used to work in the '80s, they were without power for 8, 9, 10 days, which I was like, what?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, well, that could be the story in Atlanta too. You get a really big windstorm, or I was there for the big ice storm back in '73. Was that when the huge ice storm was?
I believe so.
Yeah. And we didn't have power for a long time in the city. And one of the reasons was that the ice took down the trees and the streets were like this deep in ice and everything was frozen into the street. So it wasn't like you couldn't move the things out of the street because they were iced into the street. And I was at the TV station calling people on the phone randomly from the phone book to tell them what was going on because nobody had power and nobody could watch TV. It was one of those moments. All right, Jordan, you got a couple more before we wrap up?
Yeah, we're kind of starting to wrap it up a little. We've reached the top of the hour here, so we're kind of getting towards the end. Everybody get your last couple of questions in. We maybe have time for one more, but maybe we can just quickly recap the Nor'easter, what to expect this weekend, some final thoughts, and then we can get one last question in.
All right, so the tides are elevated already on the southeast coast behind the front. So once it gets cool and you get those northeast winds coming in there, that's going to elevate the water initially in South Carolina. And so Charleston, the peak prediction is tomorrow afternoon for the high tide there and major flood stage. So this is already significant as this is all just beginning to get started. And then it moves up the coast so that Saturday in North Carolina, and then moving north into the Tidewater, Virginia, and points north. So Sunday, Monday, right? So where you are, late Sunday into Monday in Maryland?
Well, the 1 o'clock tide on Sunday is the high tide, around 1.
Yeah.
I think they'll certainly, but then the following high tide, early Monday morning.
Yeah.
The push of water. And again, we're still waiting to find out if it's going to slow down, it's going to stall,
right?
And how long does it sit there? But hopefully the trend of it moving away later Monday and Monday night sticks around. So we get that off the table. We're not going to be dealing with 3 days or 4 days, kind of like the 62 storm that sat out there here in Ocean, and the whole town went underwater in March of 62. It just didn't move.
Yeah, and destroyed Long Beach Island, New Jersey, where my parents had a home there, and we called it back then the Great March Storm. It's usually called the Ash Wednesday Storm.
Yep.
Now, when you look it up on Wikipedia or something, it was the 5 high tide cycles, I think it went, right? It sat there and just pounded water at the coast for 5 cycles. So this one is complicated because it's underneath of an area of low pressure, and exactly how it kind of pinwheels with that low pressure system makes the forecast uncertain at best in terms of when it kicks out.
And Jerry may have a little bit of influence on it.
Yeah, well, Jerry affects the high pressure offshore for sure, and
Yeah.
exactly how all those systems work together.
Not as
Depends on
much
how heavy or how strong Jerry gets too. That makes a difference as well.
Yeah, not the kind of impact Umberto had on Imelda. I mean, that was
right. Nothing like that.
just
Right.
slung it out. Thankfully.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So do we have any final question there, Jordan? Or we should go ahead and wrap it up for today.
Jordan, should we?
Oh, Jordan, we can't hear you. I think you.
Can't hear you,
Oh,
Jordan.
my bad. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys actually answered everybody's questions, so I
right.
think we can go ahead and
All
wrap
right,
it up from here.
Talk about we'll be out there showing everybody the elements coming up this weekend.
Yeah,
Right,
so we've got full coverage on Fox Weather. If you don't know how to get Fox Weather, go to foxweather.tv, and it'll tell you how to get it on your phone, your iPad, your computer, your TV. If you have a Roku, an Apple, or Samsung, an LG, whatever you have, it'll tell you how you can watch Fox Weather. It's always free.
On the phone.
On the phone.
You can watch it.
That's because you're a youngster,
lot.
Mike.
You can watch it in a parking lot, in a movie. It doesn't matter. It's it's great. It's right here,
and it's free.
Yes.
It's free on every platform. So foxweather.tv, you'll get it full coverage here all weekend long, as long as this storm is a threat. And of course, if anything develops in the tropics, we'll be on top of that too.
And tune in through the weekend, because every 6 to 12 hours we get new model runs, and that will update the track and deal with the severity of the impacts. But again, Weather Service has high wind watches out for New York City, for the boroughs of Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, Jersey Shore, Delaware Shore, 3 days out. So that tells you something, that this has the potential to be a pretty nasty storm at the coast, and potentially even causing some problems inland with the heavy rainfall and even some gusty winds over 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, and wind impacts all the way down the coast, all the way to the Carolinas. So that's it for today. Thanks so much, everybody that tuned in and sent in questions. And we'll be back at least one more time this hurricane season. Let's see what this next week brings and how the long-range projections are. And let's cross our fingers that this front does in hurricane season, though I wouldn't bet on it. All right, everybody, have a good day. Thanks.